Well, hello and welcome to today's episode of the Power of Your Mind podcast. You are listening to episode number 163. I'm Victoria Gallagher, Law of Attraction hypnotist and #1 best-selling author of Practical Law of Attraction: Align Yourself with the Manifesting Conditions and Successfully Attract Your Desires. I'm also the founder of HipTalk.com and HypnoCloud apps, which gives you access to over 500 hypnosis recordings right in the palm of your hand. So be sure to download that app from the app stores today. And today I have a couple of special guests with me, Jack Elias and Cece Miller. And for over 32 years, Jack Elias has been working with people all over the world via Skype, Zoom, FaceTime, WhatsApp, phone for counseling, coaching, transpersonal hypnotherapy, NLP training, and his lovely wife is a communications consultant, Cece Miller. She's a book editor, marketing, consulting, and they have written this wonderful book here, The Outrageous Guide to Being Fully Alive. Business professionals, artists, coaches take the trainings that Jack has put together, and he helps them to quickly connect more deeply with their subconscious power, creative intelligence to accomplish their personal and professional goals. Healthcare practitioners and alternative healthcare practitioners have taken my courses to improve their healing skills, and he is often referred to others to remove and resolve emotionally based afflictions of all kinds. Jack is the author of Finding True Magic, and together he and Cece Miller have written this new book, The Outrageous Guide for Being Fully Alive. And Jack can be found on jackelias.com. And both Cece and Jack are going to be sharing some insights today with us on the outrageous guide for being fully alive, how to defeat your inner trolls and reclaim your sense of humor. So, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thanks. Nice to be with you.
Yes, it's nice to see you again, Jack, and meet you for the first time, Cece. This is an honor to have two guests here who are both brilliant authors of this wonderful guide to being fully alive. I mean, this is very, very important wisdom. So I'm really excited to dive in and, really help people to understand what it's going to take for them to be fully alive. So thank you so much for being here. Why don't we kind of get started today with just a brief introduction to like how this book came about and why it's so important for somebody to read.
Okay.
Let's start with you, Cece.
Well, I've been trying to get Jack to write a book for a while, and he wouldn't do it. To write book two, because book one is very much about hypnotherapy, and I wanted there were people that really need the insights that Jack teaches. And so I tricked him into writing this book by asking him a bunch of questions first in a little video interview, and then kind of nudging him to write some blog posts. And we ended up co-writing a lot of these blog posts. And the longer we did this, the more I edited them, the more we were co-authoring them. And so at the end of it all, we had a book. And I said, well, I think we have a book now. And he said, okay.
That
So
is
that's how the
amazing.
book came to be. But all the questions are the kinds of questions that people ask anyway. In Jack's practice, in my work with people, they're all the kinds of things we all run up against all the time, obstacles we all have, and emotional difficulties we all face.
Right. Well, I love that approach to getting somebody to write a book. And yeah, it is about time because I mean Jack is a very talented hypnotherapist and I mean all everything. And the book, the last book, Finding True Magic, was amazing, amazing. I mean, I literally, I still don't have the copy in this office. It's in my downstairs office, but that it has coffee stains on it. Um, if your book gets coffee stains on it, you know it's a good book, right? Because I mean, I literally am just, so mesmerized by this material. So, I think you're right. It was about time to, to write another one. Might as well just, there's so much information in there where that comes from. So, and I love that this book, I was opening, just looking at the table of contents, and it really covers the whole gamut. I mean, dealing with anxiety and stress, number one, because that really is something that's impacting. It impacts everyone, anxiety and stress. And anger and hurt and loneliness, and there's just self-doubt and worry, and then how to get to the real happiness through mindfulness and meditation. So I mean, this is a very well needed manual for dealing with and navigating these emotions that people are dealing with. So tell us, Jack, how was that for you as you were sort of being lured into writing this book?
Well, it was a very skillful means on Cece's part because it was fun right from the beginning when we did the video Q&A. It was a lot of fun, and then she and our friend Carlos, who's a master videographer, broke it up into several little Q&A clips, and then Cece created the topics for each of those. It's like the seed topic, and then I wrote articles, and then she edited the articles, and she improved them, vastly improved them. Like when we were finished, she was planning out the cover and the marketing of the book with me as the author, and I said, you should be a co-author. She was just going to call herself the editor.
I love it.
I think it's fair for her, more than fair, that she's also the co-author. So it was, it's good advice for anybody to, in NLP, they use the word chunk. Like if you have a big project, and one of the best ways to not get overwhelmed is to chunk it into bite-sized pieces.
Absolutely.
Like if somebody gives you one of those giant Hershey bars and says, eat this in one bite, it's not going to be a pleasant experience. But if you take little chunks, piece by piece, then it's wonderful.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. I've written a couple myself, and, and really having a structure for me is just an imperative. Like when it really comes to anything, I need to kind of I need to see the big picture, but I also need to have those little mini completions to feel like I've achieved some level of achievement or success that day. So I like that, there goes the dryer.
We don't hear
it. So tell us, so what are some of the most common problems that people face in overcoming the personal struggles that we all sort of, seem to have?
Yeah, it's you named them pretty much. It's they're all fear-based, and they're all toxic shame-based, which was a term coined by John Bradshaw, which specifically, as opposed to just shame, which can be healthy shame. Toxic shame is thinking there's something inherently wrong with your being, as opposed to being ashamed of doing something that might have been harmful. So since it's a flaw in your being, it's inescapable. So it's constantly generating self-doubt, self-hatred, fears of all kinds, therefore stress and anxiety. So that's really the root.
Thank you for that distinction too. I wasn't aware of that. So the toxic shame is there's something inherently wrong with me as a person, as a being, versus shame of, just regular shame where you're just like, oh, I made a mistake. That was not right.
And the
Okay.
thing, one thing that really locks it in is that we believe, not only do we believe we're inherently flawed, but we believe it's unique to us.
Mm-hmm.
And that really locks it in because you're afraid to share it, because you
Mm-hmm.
think you're the only one. And the horrible irony for the human race is that it's not unique at all. Everybody has it. So it's like everybody's going around having toxic shame that they have a nose.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're going around in the world like this because they don't want anybody to see their nose. But because they're going around like this, they never look up and see everybody else has a nose too.
Right. So every single one of us has toxic shame.
Yeah.
Is there any getting away from it?
Yeah, it's make-believe.
Mm-hmm.
And it's different degrees, right?
Yeah.
There's different degrees of it.
If, to frame it from the hypnotherapy point of view, the way I frame it is the root hypnotic trance. It's a construct. It's not real. We were indoctrinated into it, mainly in childhood, before we had a cognitive faculty, before the age of 7.
What causes that? What about our childhood causes that?
Well, this book is a lot about a paradigm I formulated a little while ago, a few years ago, called the 13 types of confusion that create all of our suffering. And I want people to appreciate the word confusion, which is con means with, fusion means pour together. So you get a state of confusion anytime you pour things together that don't go together.
Oh.
And the root confusion from which all the other ones arise is fusing worth of being with activity. And not merely your activity, but how your activity is judged. So a little child before the age of 7 gets thousands of messages from unskillful parents that what they do means there's something wrong with themselves. Like, it's not you did a bad thing and let me explain to you why it's a bad thing and let me constructively help you understand a better way to act. No, you get hit and called a bad girl. So when you're in that pre-cognitive phase, your parents are gods. They're giant gods. You don't have a conceptual understanding, but you have an instinctive conviction that they have power of life and death over you, which is true. Well, power of life and death, that's the definition of a god. So you have these giant gods giving you messages, and plus you don't understand that they have an inner life as human beings. They're gods. So what they say and do, you don't interpret them through a filter of mom's having a bad day or they're conflicted about this or that. You think whatever they say and do to you is a law of the universe.
Wow. It's
so if
true,
you spill your milk and you get spanked and sent to your room and they withdraw their love, you think, law of the universe, you spill your milk, it proves you're no good and you deserve to be punished. That's how it, and you think about how many thousands of messages like that you can get before the age of 7.
And that's really pretty typical, normal behavior of a parent to do that. It's not like they're setting out to give you toxic shame. They're very well intentioned. They're trying to protect you.
They just don't know better.
They don't know they don't know what they're, forgive them. They know not what they do. They don't know that that's what they're doing. Every time you get in trouble, it's scarring you and wounding you and giving you this toxic shame.
And one of the sad ironies of it is, I think it's fairly commonly recognized that the golden rule of child rearing is love the child, constructively criticize the behavior. The root confusion is attack the child for their behavior, shame the child for their behavior. So it's a sad irony that it's out there, it's simple. I mean, really, it's the golden rule of how to relate to yourself and to anyone. respect their being, constructively criticize the activity so that everybody can get a higher level of understanding.
Right. Well, just quickly, before we dive a little bit more into how we fix this, how do we fix the root of that with the parents? Like, what does a parent, because I'm sure I have a lot of parents, who don't know that they're, doing this right now. And so I just drew all over the walls. I'm 4 years old and I think I'm an artist and I'm going to draw all over the walls. And my mom says, bad girl, go to your room, right? Let's rewind that and let's replay that the healthier way, the more constructive way.
You start your message to the child with not just words, but with you connect with your heart love for the child and appreciating the sacredness of the child, and that they don't know anything. They're just being their natural sweet self, so that you speak with compassion and love and gratitude that they're in your life, and recognize this is your job, is to help them learn how things work in the world. So you tell them, you might appreciate the wonderful thing they drew on the wall and say, but mommy has to clean the wall, and it's not fun for me to clean the wall. I might look angry while I'm cleaning the wall, but I'm just angry about having to clean the wall today. But I love you, and I want you to stay happy and joyful.
And the $5,000 I just spent to have the walls
They don't know that.
freshly painted and wallpapered.
So then you learn, you direct it at your faulty activity, like, wow, that was a foolish choice. What was I thinking? I got a 3-year-old, a 4-year-old, and thought I should spend all this money on this wall. That's not their fault. That's my mistake.
Yeah,
right.
I should be more skillful. Maybe I should, paper the wall with butcher paper for a while or something. Give them a spot where they can draw. It's always comes down to skill. If that's what you saw your parents do, you're going to do that automatically, unless you've interrupted that pattern because you've recognized that there's something wrong with the pattern. If that's what you think is a good parent does, I love my parents. My parents were good parents, and they probably were good enough parents in most cases. And that's what they did to me, and I turned out okay. So that's what a good parent should do, right? Unless there's something that interrupts that and says, well, let's try something else. That might have worked fine for you, but it may not work very well for your child. And we're all different people, and some children do very poorly in that kind of environment, and some of them are just as robust as ever, But what I notice about, the way that Jack teaches it, confusing being with activity, is that most people are just living stories. They're living constantly in a conversation with themselves that has nothing to do with their essential being, which is precious and perfect, And if we think that we're all this stuff that we do and say, then we're missing the point. And it's almost impossible to appreciate your children as their pure being when they do something you don't like, if you haven't taken a step back and said, oh, I have pure being and I made a mistake and I'm still okay. We have to be able to do it for ourselves. So you can know tricks, parenting tricks, but it's not the same thing as having a fundamental understanding of what's going on.
Right. Well, and then, as we grow up and become adults, then we shame ourselves by continuing to oh God, I do it to myself. I didn't get all my to-do list taken care of. I make this to-do list every day and I don't get it checked off. What's wrong with me? Why, why did I find myself doing this that wasn't even on my to-do list instead of that, and of course that's, probably perpetuating that underneath the surface. I'm probably just creating more of the same by browbeating myself for not getting the list checked off.
Well, I think one of the main things that makes it hard for people to change is they've been taught to regard things as psychological problems, like what you just said. Sounds like a psychological problem. But what it really is is a skill.
Mm-hmm.
We learn to skillfully hurt ourselves. We learn, everything we learn through repetition and vividness. Right? And hypnotherapists are taught this. If you want to make a powerful hypnotic suggestion stick, you do it with repetition and vividness. But they don't get taught the obvious isn't pointed out. Very, very few people, including hypnotherapists, have recognized that that's a generalized thing, that everything we learn through repetition and vividness. Every day we're involved with repetition and vividness. So in those first 7 years, roughly 7 years before we have a cognitive faculty functioning, we are repeatedly getting these messages, fusing our being with our activity. And remember, they're giants, so it's always vivid, especially if it's an angry giant. So it locks in the habitual pattern. It locks in a paradigm of thinking in that way, of thinking in a self-attacking way, because you got hypnotized into it. And let me give you a little visual. So we start out, before anything bad happens, we are a pure manifestation of being, right? Little brand new baby, pure manifestation of unself-conscious exuberance. Unself-conscious, it's just, that's the nature of life. So it's like Yahoo, 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 moment by moment, okay? When that gets insulted, there's a natural recoil. Okay, so you're on Yahoo, you get hit, you go, oh. But because you don't know that the gods have inner lives and are not necessarily sane, and that what they're doing isn't the law of the universe, the only life you're aware of is the life of this joyful energy. So you learn to turn your hardwired survival instinct, which is designed to push away insult. The only source of insult you can perceive is the joy. Because rudimentary thought is, it's your fault I'm getting hit.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So you learn to shut it down to survive. But it's not just a one-step process. I think it's helpful if you think of it this way, that you have this space, this sphere of consciousness, and that this joyful exuberance fills it up moment by moment. Yahoo just fills that space. When you retract it because you're being insulted in some way, you create a vacuum in that space. Nature abhors a vacuum. Mm-hmm. So what you immediately do, every time you retract, you fill that space with something else. And that something else is, you begin to construct the false self, the personality self, to keep this down. If you didn't do that, it would keep popping open and you keep getting hit. So that's what happens the first few times, but then you learn to habituate the false self, like the good little girl, the good little boy, the quiet little girl, the quiet little boy. So we're constructing our false personality self as we go, as we more and more restrict the natural joyful self.
So it's like this persona.
Yeah, we end up with these self-attacking stories too, that can be hidden. But that's where they come from. That's what we mean by inner trolls. You know, these inner trolls grow from this false self. It's always attacking us for our natural exuberance that Jack's describing. You know, that's our natural self, our true self.
And for the most part, the stories of the trolls are just what our parents said to us.
So all those trolls, our inner critic, it's just everything that our mom and dad told us when we were getting in trouble and not being Have and not being a good little girl. So take us now to today. Here we are. We're a grown woman, and we've got all these negative, or man, and we've got all these negative criticizing words. And, I personally, I've been very conscientious because, I'm in this work, but so many other people, I even listen to my husband sometimes, it'll, just if you make a mistake, it's like, oh, that's so stupid, and people say that to themselves all the time. Oh, I'm so lazy. Oh, I'm so tired. I'm so, uh, whatever, and they're constantly beating themselves up and they don't even realize it. And it's probably just because that's, that you just learn over time to acclimate to that. And that's just like is what's normal. But tell us, like, what is the impact that that's having on you by having that inner critic constantly, badgering you?
Well, yeah, you're causing yourself suffering constantly, needless suffering. It's never justified. Again, we get indoctrinated and habituated to thinking we're relating to reality, to the laws of cause and effect, when really we're just relating to confused opinions of these gods. Like somehow it's a law of the universe that if you spill your milk or poop your pants when you're supposed to be potty trained, that's proof you violated a significant law of the universe and deserve to be punished.
That's sad.
And also it's ridiculous. I mean,
Yeah.
it's because this is just being a human being.
Yeah.
Human children do what human children do. There's nothing inherently wrong with that. But what we do is instead of responding naturally in our spontaneous, natural way, with energy and aliveness to our experience every day, we are instead having this private conversation with ourselves. Is it okay to do this, or is it not okay to do this? Oh, I did that poorly. I did this kind of okay. I did this very poorly. I did this wonderfully. And we're constantly judging ourselves and others and our experience, and we're not able to really experience our life. We're not able to live fully because we're just responding to these stories and messages. It's a kind of prison, it's a kind of hypnotic trance that we're living in.
I can go back to my visual. Once you have made a complex hypnotic habitual lockdown pattern and you have the false self on top of it, when your critical faculty does come online around the age of 7, the crust of this is like the shame. You're not allowed to use your new cognitive faculty to unravel this because you now think it's the truth. So you could have a wonderful cognitive faculty and you can create wealth and fame and power and even a lot of good joy in the world, but inwardly be miserable. Because no matter what you do on the outside, not allowed to unravel what's in here, that you're defective. And that's why if people do have a lot of capabilities and resourcefulness, it can be even worse because they do great success and they discover no matter how good I do, it's never changes this. And so then they can have great despair and even kill themselves.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, you hear about that stuff all the time.
You know, they have millions of dollars and you think they're, masters of the universe.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and that just goes to show that, nothing really can buy inner peace, inner happiness, true inner joy, except for the work that, our own transformative work that cannot lead us. Is the promise of this work that we can get through and penetrate through that crust and actually rewire and change that all that stuff.
And the great surprise of doing that is that your sense of humor comes back.
Yes.
Well, things don't seem so heavy and serious anymore. There are terrible things happening in the world. That doesn't stop happening. But you stop being consumed by your own dramas. You start being able to see the humor in things and appreciate that, equally. So that's the energy that's reclaimed. Once you reclaim your energy and you're not using your energy to push everything down, as Jack's explaining, because that takes a tremendous amount of energy. a tremendous amount of our energy to keep all that going, rather than just respond spontaneously. So once we reclaim that, we can do all kinds of things with it. And it wants to create all kinds of exciting things. And we're free to enjoy that then.
Is that why there's a lot of shame around just doing what you love? I mean, like being an artist, being creative, and, because you're supposed to suppress that. You're supposed to live in that kind of mucky, serious, get a real job.
You better not get a big head and be selfish. You better tone it down.
Right. Tone down. So what is the process?
Let me give you a really poignant example. And the process, I think, when you understand about the structure of creating suffering is this confusion, and you separate the confusions, you get rapid release. So I had someone come who they were about 50, and they just noticed, because they'd like cycled through it about 4 times, where they had a lot of capability, a lot of creativity. They built something just about to fruition, and then they sabotaged it. And then they built something in next, just to about fruition, and then they sabotaged it. And then they did it a 3rd time. When they did it the 4th time, they went, oh, maybe there's a pattern here. And so then they came to me and they described this to me. And so I was gathering information and exploring. And as I often do, I asked about, do you have any significant childhood memories, good or bad? And she said, oh, I have this wonderful, I don't remember much about my childhood, but I remember this one thing that I just loved, which was that I couldn't wait to wake up in the morning, because my dad would pick me up and carry me out, and my mom would come along. He'd carry me out to the car. He's going to work, and give me a big hug and hand me over. And I just loved doing it. I loved him picking me up and carrying me out to the car. It was just ecstasy. And she said, one day we did that, and for some reason I was real clingy, and I wouldn't let him go. I didn't want him to go. And he very lovingly, he didn't get angry. He just very lovingly, reassuring me, peeled me off of him and handed him over to Mom. And he, I'll see you later, honey, like I always do. And he drove off to work. And he never came back.
Oh.
He got killed in a car accident.
Oh my goodness. Oh.
So remember, generally before the age of 7, you don't have a cognitive faculty. You can't think critically, can't discriminate. You don't understand how the world works. All you understand, you have a developmental narcissism where everything's about you, everything comes from you. You have a grandiose sense of your power. So this little 3-year-old mind with hatred directed towards herself says, this is your fault. You could have stopped him. It's your fault he's dead. You never deserve to be happy.
Oh.
That's the kind of toxic story that can come out of trauma.
Yeah.
Before you get to process it.
But that got submerged.
Right.
That and remember, learnings are a function of vividness and repetition. That was so vivid, didn't need a lot of repetition.
Right.
And then it became part of this underlying shell of complexity of confusions. Her really brilliant cognitive faculty came online. She started being active in the world. But as soon as she started manifesting a certain degree of happiness, it woke up this inner troll and said, oh, no, you don't. And mysteriously, she would sabotage.
Yeah.
So in this session, we just had one session. When she got that, the first thing it did was she gave herself permission to grieve. She just started sobbing. And we just let that happen for a long time. She did all the sobbing that was the true response of that little girl to losing her father.
Yeah.
And then that washed away all the structure of the confusion. And so after that, she was able to live a life that was genuinely, creative and affirming.
Beautiful. That all happened in one session.
Yeah.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. And pretty much all the problems just vanished
Yeah,
after that.
it's like, you can have a massive, complex house of cards, but if you know which card to pull out, it disappears right away. If you have all kinds of complex theories about you have to start with the hearts or the clubs or this, can get very involved and frustrating, and maybe you don't get anywhere.
I've found that in a lot of cases with clients and myself personally, is just like sometimes you just hit the right moment, the right cathartic moment. You just need to like bawl your eyes out about that for as long as it takes. And so many times I think people are afraid to step into that because they're afraid that if they go there, they're never going to stop crying. But, really, if you allow yourself to do it deeply enough and fully and completely enough, it's gone much quicker than you realize that it would be. It's not like a never ending deep pit of despair that you're going into. It's pretty cleansing and pretty quick, that I've found.
It can be. I mean, it depends on the depth of the trauma and how much of it there is, because, some people are deeply traumatized in multiple ways, and it may take them some time, to grieve those things. But it's true what you're saying, is that when the opportunity comes, if we go ahead and feel that fully for that moment, the grief that exists in that moment, then that moment's grief, we have fully felt it, and we have fully allowed ourselves to respond to life. That's our life. That moment of grief is just as much as our life as a moment of immense joy, right? And so we have to be willing to feel that. And it's hard if you've been told or given the impression that it can be never ending, and you'll become non-functional or crazy or all kinds of things, stories that we tell in our culture that are not accurate at all.
Right.
But if we have that idea, then we pile fear on top of that. Right.
That's great.
One aspect of living with more and more conviction in the false self, the more you believe you're the false self, which is just a bundle of behaviors. There's no being in there. It's just behaving properly to avoid getting hit. The more you believe in the socialized self, the more you lose intuitive awareness of the nature of your organic being, which is why you can have this fantasy: if I cry, I'll cry forever. If I let myself rest, I'll never get up. Those are ridiculous fantasies that can only be believed if you're completely involved in this fantasy self. If you were in touch with your organic being, you would know you'll cry until it's resolved. You'll rest until you're rejuvenated, and then you'll get up.
Yeah. And you know what? It's so true. I think the reason why we stay stuck in, like the pain is, people will wallow. They'll only dip their toe into it. And then so they'll feel the discomfort of almost feeling that, but not quite allowing themselves to embrace it, because it seems like it's going to hurt so bad, because just what that little bit hurts. And so they stay stuck in that zone of, I can't go all the way there. And then and that, to me, like, I mean, that's like the, what's that? What's that place? Purgatory. It's like purgatory. They just kind of stay stuck in purgatory. Yeah.
Uncertainty. We don't get a lot of instruction about how to work with uncertainty, which is
Right.
most of our life.
Right.
We don't know what's going to happen next. But what you're saying, I think, is like really key. It's that's the point. can we tolerate that moment of uncertainty where we don't know how long we might cry, or how it might feel if we do cry it out, and then what happens? Who am I if I do let go of this and I stop just telling myself stories about how awful it is or was? Then what's out there? We don't know.
Right.
That's exciting if you're
Yeah.
in the face of, this is an exciting life full of creative possibilities, but it's scary if your story is different.
Now, is there always grieving involved in the exercises and the techniques, or are there other exercises and techniques to help us to, achieve rapid positive transformation?
That's a great question. I think it's important for people to understand there's just one energy.
Mm-hmm.
And the inherent nature of that energy is that it's exuberant and joyful. And that the inherent quality of grief is exuberant joy.
Mm.
The reason it's painful is because it's being twisted by the self-hating indoctrinations. So when you grieve, you're not doing this other energy of grieving energy that's painful. You've activated the exuberant joy to untwist itself. And in the untwisting, you feel pain, but you misinterpret it. Like a lot of reason people won't go through the whole process. They'll start feeling the pain of the untwisting and they'll misinterpret it as, oh, it's getting worse. And then they'll shut it down. So grieving is the natural recognition, not conscious. It's not your conscious self. It's your organic being's recognition of change, of loss. And not like tragic loss, but the natural loss that everything changes moment by moment.
Mm-hmm.
So we're actually grieving moment by moment, but a lot of it's not a significant change. So you don't register it as, traumatic grief. Some things you do. But the point is, we're going to lose everything. We're losing everything constantly, moment by moment. So the secret of life is to learn to grieve exuberantly.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah.
And an idea came to me as you were saying that, that it's like this unraveling. The pain is the unraveling of it. It feels like it's getting worse. It's in a way like having a deep tissue massage on your emotions.
Yeah.
Great metaphor. This is a great analogy.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's like it hurts, but it kind of hurts good in a good way, and it's releasing, and there's going to be this release and this relief when you're on the other side of that. And you're not going to just get one deep tissue massage in your life. You're going to have many different times where you're going to need that.
So when you realize, when you have a foundational insight that you can have a confidence in that everything is joyful, exuberant energy, then you stop hating and trying to push away your problem states, because they're made of joyful, exuberant energy. So you bring them in instead of pushing them away, and that releases the conflict, releases the suffering.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I love it.
in the confusion of the false self, there's a firm conviction to always run away from this, because you think this is the evil cause of your suffering. So you always run away. But when you learn to relax, because your being is inherently pure, this energy is inherently pure. It's like water is water. You could pour it into any kind of misshapen vase. The vase might be ugly, but it's still the same pure water. So when you have that understanding, then you relax and welcome the ugliness, which allows the ugly outline, if you will, to dissolve, and then you're just left with the purity of being.
It reminds me also of a little bit of Vipassana meditation. Are you familiar with it?
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, and during that, you accept it all. And when you're sitting there for hours and hours and hours on end, I mean, you do have like this pain arise. But you realize that if you look at it rather than try to like, oh, don't go there, don't put any awareness there. But if you actually allow yourself to just be with it, you recognize the truth of life, the law of nature, that everything changes, passes away, evolves, transforms. And it's the same with our emotions. It's the same with everything. It's just, the whole thing. It's all interconnected. And so I love it. So, so your book also mentions a user-friendly guide to dehypnotize yourself out of these harmful self-trances. So like a lot of what you've talked about is like doing work with a therapist. Can a person take this book and do some of their own internal
Absolutely.
work?
Absolutely.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
It's utterly simple. Like you can maybe it would be good to journal to keep your focus in the beginning. A lot of people are not really have much mastery over their thinking processes, so writing things down helps. But it's so simple to just write down the way you talk to yourself and see that I'm attacking my being because of activity, and then just separate it, and then just write down, I love and accept myself even though I banged the bumper of my car. I don't have to pretend that I'm happy about that. I'm really sad and angry about bumping the car. It's a lesson about learning how to park the car and drive the car. It's not a proof that there's something wrong with me and that I have to hate myself. And so you affirm, even though I did that, I love and accept myself thoroughly and completely. And do that repeatedly with passion, and it becomes your new natural habitual way of thinking.
Love it. And it's so true. The repetition. I mean, you have to say it till you get it. So many times people think they can just say something one time or a few times and that they've got it. But, it's just the same way that we learned initially. We learned through repetition, and we're going to have to unlearn and relearn new things through that constant repetition, or like you said, through the vividness of it. And when you say vividness, I think not just vivid, imagery, but vivid in
Passion.
In feeling. It's the passion. It's the passion.
And a lot of ways that people unnecessarily get in their own way is like when they hear this thing about repetition, they immediately think from the reference frame of the false self paradigm, oh, so I'm going to have to repeat this over and over again. So when I tell them, I say, hey, you have a built-in coach. You're going to think these negative, confused thoughts 1,000 times a day. So they're your coach. You don't have to remember to do the new one. Just let them remind you. Whenever you have a negative thought, now you know the structure of it. Transform it to this healing way. You're doing it anyway. You're repeating anyway. So now you know how to transfer from the toxic repetition to the healing repetition. And the toxic repetition is reminding you. So now it's your friend. So it's all good.
Awesome. I love it. So this wonderful book has all kinds of techniques and tips and exercises that a person can use to, literally eradicate these problems like worry and self-doubt, and transform that into kindness and confidence, and facing illness, aging, death, and the holidays. I mean, these are all real world issues that we all deal with. So tell us how our audience can get a copy of this book.
Okay.
The book is available everywhere now. So you can get it on Amazon. You can get it if you go to our website, Jack's website. There's a page there where the book is featured, and you can buy it in our bookshop. It's from Book Baby. And that's our favorite way if you want to get a print copy and have it in your own little hand and be able to thumb through. But it is available as an ebook also.
On Amazon.
On Amazon. And so one thing I do want to mention is to your point, is that there are so many actionable techniques and insights in this book that, I mean, you could really make a project of it. But we've designed it so that you can take the thing that's bugging you right this minute and go directly to that. It's very easy. You were pointing out the table of contents. It's designed so that you can go to the area of life that you're having trouble with now, and you can just take a look at one article. Every single chapter in that book has, at the end of it, a series of exercises, you could call them. Sometimes they're insights to consider, but they're very actionable. They're things you can do to address that particular challenge. And they do have an effect. And as you say, it's very important to practice. So you have to use them again and again. But you can work on anxiety alone for some time. Fear and anxiety, we all have that to work with. More or less degrees. But there are lots of really good tips, no matter what it is. It could be sadness, it could be depression, it could be that your fear of other people's high expectations of you, and you're constantly putting pressure on yourself. All those things are in there and accessible.
And I think it's so timely because these days people are becoming much more aware of the issues that are coming up for them with their fears, their anxieties, their worries, and they don't know what to do with it. And, you know, and I love books. I just love books that give you something to do with it, not just give you information or talk about it, but like literally, okay, like put the book down and do this mental exercise. They're probably mostly like mental type of exercises that a person will guide themselves through in their mind, and or breathing, or things of that nature.
A lot of encouragement for people to rehearse things and act them out.
Mm-hmm.
That as the vivid component, because it
That
is
is
all
great. That is great.
I checked Amazon today. They do list the paperback, but they say they're out of stock. So you can get the paperback at Book Baby Bookshop. Book Baby Bookshop.
Book Baby Bookshop, and look for the outrageous guide to being fully alive, which that is an amazing title, and defeat your inner trolls and reclaim your sense of humor, which we all need to do this day and age, or at all times, to have a sense of humor that is really going to get you through this life and help you to enjoy your life that you're meant to enjoy. So thank you so much for coming on the Power of Your Mind podcast and empowering our audience today with this wonderful book and all the techniques and the new understandings that can help a person to really get relief from anything that they've been suffering from, and to really understand this at a whole new level. I really appreciate the deep insight that you've shared with our audience today.
Thank you for inviting us. And then remember, they can go to jackelias.com.
jackelias.com. And that'll be in the show notes. They can just click. Okay. They can just click right over there, or go to jackelias.com and get yourself a copy of this book.
Thank you, Victoria.
Thank you.
Thank you.